Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. As you can see by the title, it was a quite a sunny day in July. The sky is clear and mostly blue. It was a little bit windy in parts, so I've silenced the ambient noise from the camera so you don't pick up all the wind noise. But I just decided to jump on the bike and go out for a ride on this particular day. And so in this video I'm going to be talking about things to do with the motor vehicle industry. All the opinions expressed are my own opinions, which I have formed by various methods. I've not been asked to say any of the things that I'm saying. I've not been paid by anyone to say the things I'm saying. I'm not endorsing any brand or vehicle or anything like that, and any criticism I might level is not aimed at a particular individual. Just an expression of my understanding of how various brands are perceived in the market. So if you're not interested in hearing my thoughts on the motor vehicle market, then just turn down the sound and enjoy the scenery while I ride around Goulburn. Otherwise, feel free to listen, and if you have a comment or an opinion about something, then express it in the comments, and when I become aware of it, I will respond. So let's get started. I suspect that way back in history, even before I was born, when the wheel was invented, there were probably people who protested against the wheel. The idea was that people's personal freedom to walk wherever they wanted to walk would now be taken away because everything would be done in a wheeled vehicle, and that wasn't right. Certainly when motor vehicles appeared on the roads, and I wasn't born then either, that was back in the 1890s and coming into the early part of the 20th century, when motor vehicles appeared on roads, everybody that had an interest in the horse and buggy era would have protested vigorously and vociferously and frequently against the introduction of motor vehicles, and would have begged governments to ban them. If you think about the fact that we would not have needed blacksmiths, we would not have needed farriers, we would not need saddlers, we wouldn't have needed harness makers, we wouldn't have needed wagon makers or wheelwrights or all those sort of people, and we wouldn't have even needed the people who had to go around and pick up all the horse manure, because motor vehicles were coming onto the market. But motor vehicles at those days were very crude, they were very loud, they weren't very safe, and they were certainly very noisy. And perhaps in some ways some of the things that people said about them at the time were true. Certainly jobs in the blacksmith industry and the livery stable industry and the harness making industry would be lost, but then new jobs would be created in the motor vehicle service industry, not only in the production of motor vehicles, but in the servicing and repair of them. And whilst it's true that we may have swapped one form of pollution, that is horse waste, for petrochemical waste, the petrochemical waste and exhaust has led us to the point where we are now in terms of climate change or global warming or whatever term you want to use for that. And so one isn't better than the other. One form of pollution is just different from the other. When the motor vehicle was first introduced to roads and became a thing on roads, there was a law called the Red Flag Act, which required a motorist to have somebody walking in front of their car with a red flag. And the reason for that was so that pedestrians coming in the opposite direction would be aware that there was a car coming and would not be spooked by the loud noises. The people with horses or carriages and horses would know that a car was coming, and the loud noises and backfiring and all that sort of stuff that early motor vehicles were known for wouldn't spook the horse. The rider would be able to control the horse or move it to the side of the road or something and stop it from shying and bolting. Obviously, as motor vehicles became more ubiquitous and horses became less common on the roads, the need for that Red Flag Act there ceased to be a need for it, and it made no sense when vehicles could travel faster than walking pace anyway. Obviously, you can't employ someone to run at 30 or 40 kilometres an hour or miles an hour or whatever it was in those days in front of your car so that people weren't spooked by it. But you see the point I'm making, that every change, every new development in technology has brought about some changes which some people are in favour of and undoubtedly other people are against. And I feel that we're at that point at the moment in regard to electric vehicles. And as I said, I'm not here to endorse a brand or a model or anything like that. I'm just here to put some alternate points of view about some things that are happening in the market and some commentary that's being offered about the market. In my time, 71 years of age, I can name a lot of brands that are no longer available. I can name brands that made cars in Australia, including Toyota, Ford, Valiant, Datsun, as they were known then. They became Nissan, Mitsubishi, British Leyland, Holden, if I haven't already mentioned those, and Ford. All at one stage or another made cars in Australia, and now none of them make cars in Australia. Over the years when I was a child, my father owned a variety of cars, including a Vanguard, a Vauxhall, an Armstrong Siddeley, a Morris Oxford, an Austin Cambridge, and other vehicles. During my time, people in my street owned things like a Zephyr, a Ford Anglia, a Studebaker, a Rambler. No one owned a Duesenberg, but there were Duesenbergs on the market. There was a motor vehicle called the Cord. There were motor vehicles called Opals that have been here and gone, I think, on 2 occasions. There were motor vehicles that have been and gone and come back again called Cherry, which are made in China, and there are motor vehicles made by Daewoo which have been and gone, but have came back to Australia under the badge of Holden when General Motors bought them from the parent company for $1. So my point is that there have been a lot of car manufacturers that have made cars in Australia, and they've all folded up shop and gone. There have been a lot of cars that were sold in Australia that are no longer sold in Australia, and in fact are no longer sold anywhere. And we're at a point in the market now where I think there are a group of manufacturers like Ford and General Motors and Stellantis, which is now Chrysler, Jeep and Fiat, that are being referred to as legacy manufacturers, and a whole new bunch of manufacturers, including, of course, Tesla and a variety of Chinese brands, including BYD, Aura, MG, Xiaomi, I think is how you pronounce another one of them, Geely, GWM, Mahindra from India, and so forth, that are now entering the market and are posing a threat to those legacy or traditional manufacturers. What I suspect is going to happen over the next few years is there is going to be a bit of a winnowing out of the Australian market, and some manufacturers that are now selling cars in Australia will soon stop selling cars in Australia simply because they don't sell enough cars to make it worthwhile, and nobody wants to buy those cars, and the dealers don't keep any parts for them because they don't sell enough of them, and they don't invest any time or energy in training their technicians because they don't sell enough of those cars. And so those manufacturers will look at the Australian market and say it isn't worth our while to persist in that market. One of those, for example, may well be Stellantis. According to some statistics I saw recently, their sales have fallen 84% over the last decade. Stellantis includes, as I said, Chrysler, Jeep and Fiat. And that may be for a number of reasons, but I suspect that part of it is that that company has extraordinarily poor, if not the worst, customer relations experience, if that's the word you want to use, in Australia. The Jeep arm of that company in particular is notorious for litigating every claim of shoddy workmanship. Only recently in the Queensland Civil and Administrative Appeals Tribunal was another judgment made against Jeep, where they were ordered to give a person a full refund of a $63,000 model of their car because the car spent almost as much time in the shop as it did in the owner's garage or on the road with the owner driving it. And although Jeep disputed all of those facts, the panel at the QCAT, as it's called, found in favour of the complainant and said this car is not fit for purpose and you need to give the guy a full refund, and also you need to pay some punitive damages for charges that were excessive in terms of diagnosing faults that you should have been prepared to honour. So that's but that's a sort of another story to go into at a later stage. One of the things that seems to be doing the rounds at the moment is that the bottom has fallen out of the electric vehicle market. Now, I don't study the market well enough to know whether that is true or not, but I do know that, yes, it's certainly true that Tesla sales have fallen, and by their own admission, their earnings have not been what they expected them to be in the last quarter. And I suspect there are two reasons for that. One reason, I think, is to do with the behaviour of their chief executive of the company, or the founder of the company, whatever his particular title is, and that's Elon Musk. And it may well be that some people think that some of Elon Musk's behaviour and utterances in regard to his other business interests, for example, X, formerly known as Twitter, and things like that, have put people off buying a Tesla. Now, I'm not criticising him for his opinions. I'm saying other people who may be a bit more liberal, who may be liberal-minded and think, I'm interested in buying a Tesla, but Elon's a bit loopy, and the things that he says and does, I don't like them, so I'm not prepared to part with my money to give it to him. The other thing that has become a feature of the EV market in Australia is the surge in sales of Chinese brands, in particular MG and BYD. And the reality of that is that both BYD and MG, and particularly BYD, who seem to have set out deliberately to compete with Tesla with some of their models, are producing Tesla-like models of similar quality at much lower prices, even than the Teslas that are sold in Australia that are made in China. And so people are thinking, well, I really would like a Tesla, but I'm not prepared to pay that amount of money. But I understand that the BYD Sea Lion, I think I'm saying the right model there, is of very similar quality and it's a lot cheaper. So I'm prepared to part with my money there. Now, the effect of that has been that the share of the market held by Tesla has fallen, but in response to that, Tesla have said, well, the only way to shift stock is to reduce the price. Tesla don't advertise, so they can't advertise anymore. So they say, well, we've got this stock sitting on the lot and it's not selling. We would be foolish to continue to insist that this vehicle must be sold for this price when we've got new cars coming and we've got new models potentially coming. So let's just reduce the price of this one and get it off the lot. Now, obviously that has the effect of reducing the price of all the cars that have been sold at the old price, because if the new car was worth $68,000, for example, and it's now sold for, let's say, $63,000, then all the other cars that were paid for at $68,000 are worth $5,000 less. Now, of course, Tesla doesn't care about that because they got your money already. You care about it because when you go to trade your car in, where you thought you might get X amount of dollars for it, the market will now be telling you, well, you're going to get $5,000 less for it than what you anticipated. Now, as I say, Tesla doesn't care about that because they've already got your money for the new car. They don't get any money on the second-hand car. So what has happened there is that, yes, Tesla sales have declined, and I think in response to those, the reason for that is to do with the two factors that I have suggested. That is, I think some people are a bit turned off by Elon Musk's utterances and behaviour in other areas of his business, and Chinese brands are offering, in some cases, similar quality at much reduced prices. The other thing that's being talked about a lot in the regard to EVs is the potential for thermal runaway and battery fires. Now, I was watching Media Watch the other day, and Paul Barry was commenting on the number of negative stories that have been written about EVs, particularly by News Limited. And he quoted some figures which said that there had been something like four battery fires in EVs in the last, I forget how many years, but certainly in recent times. Now, I'm aware that there was a fire at a parking lot near Sydney Airport at one stage, and that's the only one that I'm aware of. I know that the famous Luton Airport car park fire in the UK was initially blamed on an EV battery fire, but the fire service said definitely was not caused by an EV battery. They weren't yet prepared to say what the cause of the fire was, but they were prepared to rule out the fact that an EV battery was the cause of it. Now, that's not to say that thermal runaway and battery fires aren't a potential hazard and aren't a potential risk and should be, people talking about them should be ignored, because those things are real and they are a risk. But it appears that the risk is no more significant, in fact might even be less significant than the risk of fires in combustion vehicles. Well, that's my thoughts on that matter, so thank you for watching. I hope you've either enjoyed the commentary or the scenery, or both. If you have any thoughts, please offer them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you when I'm making the next video.